So I just launched my new collection of pottery for the winter, and I was thinking about all the different systems and processes, you know I love a good system, that I've set up over the years to launch new collections. And so I thought it would be the perfect time to walk you through how I sell pottery since it's all fresh on my mind. So let's get into it. So I do 3 to 4 collection launches per year. I personally have a lot of other stuff going on, this YouTube channel for one, so I don't have that many collections. Some potters might do collection launches every month, some might do larger collections less often, and then some will just have a continuous open shop where they just keep updating as they put new work in. How you do it just depends on your workflow and how you prefer it. The reason I prefer to have larger collections less often is so I can batch. Batching these processes really saves you a lot of time. So I do all of the photos at once, ship a bunch of pieces at once. I also find that doing less collections makes the customer think that it's kind of like special. It makes a bit of excitement about the work. Okay, so this isn't really a step, rather it's something that you should continually work at throughout time. You need to build your audience for people who will be interested in your work. So for me, the beginning of my promotion of my own pottery started 10 years ago when I first made my Instagram account. And I've been slowly working at it throughout this time to build up my audience. Now, your journey might look a bit different. You might build up followers faster or slower than me, but basically you just want to keep plugging away so you have a group of hardcore fans that are so much more valuable than the kind of following you get from going viral. There's a concept in sales called 1,000 true fans. It's by this guy, Kevin Kelly. Basically, he asserts that you only need 1,000 true fans to buy 100 euros worth of your work over the course of the year before you have 10,000 euros in revenue. And I really appreciate this concept because for me 100 euros is just a couple of mugs and it feels like something that's actually achievable. So if you want to learn more about his theory, I'll link his article down below. So for potters specifically, I recommend 2 types of marketing. Number 1 is going to be visual social media. So by that, I mean Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube, even Facebook. And then the second kind is a newsletter. So for social media, what you want to do is choose one and really become an expert at it. Really kind of invest all your eggs into one basket for the beginning, because when you're just starting out, you don't want to spread yourself too thin. All of the different social media apps work completely differently, and you really kind of need to figure out what kind of content is going to work on there that's going to generate that loyal following that you're looking for. And then you're also going to want to have a newsletter. Now, this is going to be for your super fans. This is really important because it's something that you have control over and it's not susceptible to a change in the algorithm or a billionaire takeover. I personally use and do recommend MailChimp for your newsletter, not particularly because it's the best. I actually find it a little bit annoying to use, but it is free up to a certain amount of subscribers. I think it's like 2,000 subscribers. Don't quote me on that, I'm not totally sure. But once you've gone past that subscriber count, then you can move on to maybe another platform that works a little better. But when you're just starting out, we want to go for free resources as much as possible. Okay, so step 2 of selling online is you want to announce a date that you're going to be launching your products. You want to announce it as wide as possible, like on every platform that you have, and really build up that hype. One fun thing that you can do to kind of get your followers engaged in the collection launch is actually have them choose the date. I often do this on my Instagram. I'm like, would you rather do it on Saturday or Sunday? What time? This helps them get engaged in your collection launch, but you can also make sure that they're available for that time period when your collection is going to drop. Along with building the hype, I definitely encourage you to share the process of preparing your collection launch with your following as well. So you want to share, the planning of the collection, making the pots, of course, but also doing things like photography and, organizing your pieces. I do this mostly on Instagram stories. That's just the platform that I feel most comfortable on, but whatever makes sense for you. I think TikTok would work really well for this as well. Step 3 is make a schedule. Now is when you guys are reminded that I'm a type A person and lists are life. So once you have your launch date, you're going to want to work backwards from that date and figure out when you need to finish things by. So here's what I schedule. I schedule a day for photo shooting, a day for editing those photos, and a day to prepare the promotion. And then I also make a note of when the last firings are possible, so when I need to actually finish the pottery by. So this is my actual schedule for the recent launch. I wanted to have a launch in early December to kind of catch those Christmas sales, but early enough so that I know that if I'm going to be shipping products to various places in the world, they're going to get there in time for Christmas, hopefully. So in my schedule, I decided to take Saturday off. It would be great to have that day free, but it's also an extra buffer day in case I get behind on anything. And then I give myself a day each for the photo shoot, for editing those photos, and for preparing the promo. So each of these steps just takes a couple of hours each, but I'm usually juggling a few different projects. So a couple hours is, for me, more manageable. But if you're able to focus exclusively on your collection launch, you can definitely fit all those things into one day. And then I gave myself another buffer day on Tuesday and set Monday as my last glaze fire day. I thought I would have about 2 kilns worth of pots to go through, so I made 2 batches of pots going through, which meant I had until Tuesday to throw pots. I'm also speed drying my pottery, so if I am still going to throw pots on Tuesday, that means they're going to be sitting on top of one of the kilns to dry out faster so that they can make that last bisque fire date. So once all of your pots are finished, it is time for inventory. Now, this step just takes a few minutes, and I usually just do it right before the photo shoot, so I don't schedule something separate for that. Now, your inventory is going to depend on like what pottery you do, what kind of system works best for you. So for me, I usually throw a series of pots, but they often end up being slightly different from one another. I like to work quite loosely and kind of go with the flow and see how things turn out. So for me, I will take one category of pots, like for example, these Christmas trees, I'll group them all together and then I'm going to number them. So I'll write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in pencil on the bottom of the pots. You want to do it in pencil so you can erase it later on when you're shipping out your pottery. But this step is definitely going to help me later on when I'm sorting through my photos and uploading them. And then I print out this little grid that I made and just fill it out. Or sometimes I go rogue and just do it on a blank piece of paper. This sheet should contain the most important information about your pots and what you're going to use later on when you're making your listings. So it needs to include the name, the quantity, maybe quantity of each color, dimensions, weight, and of course your price. So just fill out that sheet and then we'll get back to that later when we're making our listings. So it's time to do the photos. So I personally have an old DSLR that I like to use for my photos, but honestly at this point smartphones might be good enough to take just as good of pictures. So don't worry about investing in a good camera right now. The most important part about photography is lighting and composition. So you want to take photos of your pottery from a few different angles. Basically, you want to convey as much information about your pottery to the customer as possible. You want them to really visualize themselves having that object in their hands. You want to show things like the bottom of the cup or the size. When I'm doing my photos, I often use hand, so I use my own hand in the photo, and this helps kind of conveying the size, but it also helps the customer visualize themselves holding the pot. It kind of makes it more real to them. For lighting, ideally you use natural light, and the best type of weather for taking photos is a bright but slightly overcast day. What you don't want to use is direct sunlight because that ends up looking pretty harsh and can also cause your pottery to look a little bit more yellow than they actually are. What an overcast day does is it diffuses the light so you have a more atmospheric light that is going to brighten up the entire space and the entirety of the pot instead of just one specific direct intense light. But you don't want your day to be too cloudy because that can cause your pots to be a little dark and blue. So it's kind of the perfect balance. You should try different parts of your studio or your home or even go outside. Sometimes I have to take my photos outside to get enough light. And in a pinch, you can also get light boxes to artificially add some light. I do have a couple on hand just as a backup and they're actually pretty cheap. I'll link the ones that I have down below. An extra little tip for you here is that if you are numbering your pottery like I do, you want to take the photos in the order of the numbers. This is going to help you so much later with sorting out your photos and creating your listings. So editing. Now there's a bunch of different ways to do this and you can choose whatever works for you. I personally use Photoshop just out of habit, but you can also use Affinity, Lightroom, or there's loads of apps on your phone that you can use. Basically with editing, I mean color correcting, cropping, usually lightening a little bit, and then straightening your photo. Obviously, you want your pot to look as true to how it actually is as possible, so you don't want to go overboard. But in my opinion, this is a pretty crucial step to making your pottery look as beautiful as possible. It's important to keep in mind that when you're selling products online, you are not selling the product itself, you are selling the image and the idea of the product. You're selling the photo of the product. Okay, so step 7 is to upload everything into your online shop. Now, of course, every platform is going to look a little bit differently here. I personally use Squarespace, but in general, you want to upload your photos, a little description about them, the price, the dimensions, and then if you're doing calculated shipping based on weight, you're going to want to enter that information as well as any other information that your customer might find helpful. So a little example of that is I sell tea strainers, and the holes in my strainers work best for larger leaf teas. I can never get my holes as fine as like a mesh strainer would do, so I always include that like best for large leaf teas, something like that. With Squarespace, it's possible to put a password on your page so you can like lock the page and make sure no one has access to the shop before the launch date. But another thing you can do is create a dummy page, change the URL, put that page up, and then you can work on your shop while it's a hidden page. It just depends on your website. Something that I always find a little bit tricky, even now, is shipping. So I've recently switched over to weight-based shipping, and so the website kind of calculates the shipping for you. I like this way because it's a more true to cost shipping. I'm actually looking at my shipping provider and seeing like what it actually costs them and charging the customer exactly what it's cost. I don't want to overcharge or undercharge them, but that can also be very time consuming to set up. So another option is to just do a flat rate. With shipping, you really need to decide where you're going to be shipping to. If you want to ship worldwide, that's awesome. That comes with a lot of challenges, not just with the shipping calculation, but also worldwide deliveries often get lost more. I'm kind of on the edge. This time I did offer worldwide shipping, but I only offered it like on a case-by-case basis. So someone would have to specifically contact me, and then I would generate a shipping quote for them in like a private listing. Otherwise, the website's just set up to ship within Europe. But it really just depends on where your audience is. If you have a really local fan base, then you can probably keep it to your country or to your region. Yeah, this is something that you kind of just need to figure out on your own. Well, first my battery died, and then the DHL guy came to pick up your orders from my shop update, and then I decided to eat lunch, so here we are back. I've got my tea, and let's finish. So the last thing I wanted to say about websites is that while I do love Squarespace, I think it's beautiful and aesthetic and very well designed, it's a little bit expensive. So if you're looking for a cheaper option, I have used Big Cartel in the past. I believe that they have a free option for the website, or at least it's definitely cheaper than Squarespace. And it works totally fine if you're just looking for a very simple store. And then another option, of course, is Etsy. So there's a lot of mixed emotions about Etsy online. I think Etsy is actually really great if you haven't built up that following yet, because they have sort of a built-in audience of people already going to the Etsy website. The downsides to Etsy are that they have pretty high fees. So whatever you're charging for your pot, that's not going to be what you actually take home. And then there's a lot of competition on Etsy. So when someone Googles a mug, they're going to get 100,000 different mugs. And whether or not you rise to the top is based on an Etsy algorithm, which you don't actually control. Step 8 is promote. So this is not really a step unto itself, because you should have been doing this the whole time. As I mentioned, use the process of creating your shop update as the promotion itself. One thing I like to do is schedule a little mini photo shoot a week or two before the actual photo shoot, so that I can get some good photos to use throughout my social media, like at least a week before the shop update, instead of just the photo shoot photos, which are just done a few days before the update. And even if all your pots aren't done, just get a few good pictures of some of the pots that are done that you can use for promotion. So my promotion is on Instagram. So I use Instagram stories, grid posts, and reels. I also have a newsletter, and I use Pinterest. So what I'm doing on the promotion day is I'm preparing all of the items. So for my newsletter, I typically send out 2 different emails here. One is a couple days to a week before my shop update, where I'm giving them a little preview, having some photos, and basically just announcing to my newsletter audience that a shop update is coming. And then the second email that I send is just a, hey, my shop is open now, click here, link to the shop. And with Instagram, I mentioned with my stories, I of course show all the behind the scenes information about preparing the shop. I'll post more curated, beautiful pictures on the feed. And then I'll usually try and make a reel or 2 just because that's what Instagram is promoting right now. So try and figure out some sort of short form content that you can use for that. And I don't get a lot of customers from Pinterest, at least for people who buy my pottery. But because I have all the photos already, I'll just chuck them all up on Pinterest and, can't hurt, right? And then on this day, I'm also scheduling everything. So with MailChimp, you can set it up so that it will send out your newsletters automatically. And then I use the free version of an app called Preview to schedule my Instagram posts for my grid. I'll usually post 1 or 2 photos a day to Instagram feed. And then everything else I just do manually. So the stories and the reels and stuff I just do manually. Okay, so the morning of the launch, I'm going to do a few last minute promotion. Anything that I haven't wrapped up already, I'm going to get that wrapped up. So sometimes I leave the newsletter to this day and just write that quickly before the launch. I'll also usually post something on Instagram an hour or 2 before the update and say, hey, update in 2 hours or whatever, something like that. And then when it's time to actually take it live, I'll sit down at my desk 5 minutes before. When the clock strikes 12, I will, take the password protected page down off my website or do whatever you need to do to actually make the shop be live and sellable. And then I will double check that my newsletter went out because I've done it in the past where I scheduled the wrong time. So I'll double check that that actually sent. And then of course I'll do an Instagram post, Instagram story, basically every platform that you have access to right now you should be using because now the shop is live and you want people to come visit your shop. And then once all that's done, I usually still stay at my desk for a little bit in case any emails, any DMs come in. I want to be there to answer questions if people have them and keep the customers engaged. So step 10 is rinse and repeat. So one thing I do want to say is don't get discouraged if it's your first shop update and you're seeing few sales or no sales at all. I personally will never forget the time that I did my first online sale. I did all this preparation, including setting up my website for the first time. And I did all of this promotion and I didn't sell a single pot. And that's just because my following was very small back then. And even the people who are following me, I think they were just not interested in what I was selling. But that doesn't mean that you should change your work. Perhaps you are reaching out on the wrong platform. Perhaps you should try out TikTok or Pinterest. It's all just about growing your fan base in the place that they are. And it will take time. So just because no one's buying your pottery does not mean you are a bad potter. It's more that people just haven't found you yet. So my advice here is if you're small and you're not making very many sales, this is actually a really great opportunity to try some things out. So you can go through this whole process and try and work out the kinks for yourself, because when you do this, you're not going to probably want to do it exactly like I do it. So you want to set up a system that works well for you, figure out how the shipping works, and all that is way lower stakes when you're small, when you have a small update. So small is not always bad. You can use that to gain experience so that by the time you have a big shop update with a lot of visitors, you can be very professional. So as always, if you have any questions or video recommendations, you can write them down below, or you can also find me on Instagram and DM me there. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video, which will actually be a making video again, finally. I'm so excited about this project. So I'll see you then. Oh, and check out my new collection. I'll link it down below. Bye, friends.